Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Tennis Weekly with Joel, Kim, and Chris. On today's Talk Catch Up,
Mboko stuns Osaka in front of a home crowd for her first Masters crown.
Shelton secures biggest title of his career.
And Alcaraz and Sinner return as the Cincinnati Open gets underway.
Chris, today is the 8th of August, and we are here to catch up on the week in tennis at Tennis Weekly HQ. Well, it's actually the last 4 days in the tennis world because the scheduling, Chris, is well, we're going to get onto it, but just candidly, it's just a full-on nightmare. We've got a Thursday final. The Cincinnati Open is actually already underway. So we didn't feel like we could wait until next Monday. We were just dying to talk about the finals. I mean, we do have some really exciting talking points to bring up because we do have to discuss Victoria Mboko winning in front of her home crowd. Ben Shelton, his first 1,000 title. And I know our listeners love hearing some predictions, and we're going to be making some and looking at the draws for Cincinnati. So a slight kind of abbreviated episode, but we're going to kind of dive in and talk about the main talking points. But first, Chris, before we do all of that, I hear you were at an event last night.
I was indeed actually worked out very well from a timings perspective because I was
Oh,
watching.
I'm glad it worked for someone.
Yeah, the only person that did work out was me because I went to Chapel Roan. He was doing a festival in Copenhagen, and then I came
Lovely.
home and watched the tennis. So it was a bit of a late night. I did get to see the tennis as it happened. I think probably my enjoyment of the gig might have been slightly higher than some of those moments from Osaka, but we'll get into that in a minute, I'm sure.
Indeed. Right. Let's dive into it. And we are going to talk about what happened at the Canada Open for the women, first of all. And we had the final between the Canadian sensation Victoria Mboko and Naomi Osaka. Mboko coming through in 3 sets, getting it done 2-6, 6-4, 6-1. Chris, Mboko, what a story this has been. I mean, we were going into the Canada Open thinking, where are the stories gonna be? Because not a lot of the top players are playing it. More so probably in the men's version, but still no Sabalenka in the women's event. A lot of the top players falling early on, like Jessica Pegula, Coco Gauff to Mboko on her run. This is an incredible story. I mean, what was the story of the final?
Well, I mean, the fact there was a final is something we should talk about as well, Joel, because it feels like, based on what Mboko had said, there was a risk that she might not be able to play given kind of a
Mm.
wrist injury that she had. So I think potentially that might be a little bit of a way of explaining sort of the slow start from her in comparison to Naomi Osaka, who really got out of the blocks well. We have seen Mboko come back from some of these situations, which is really impressive for a player of her age that, she's so resilient in these moments, whereas Osaka wasn't exactly the picture of resilience. So probably could have gone to Osaka in two if she'd have kind of, well, kept a level head throughout. And then that final set, unfortunately, was very difficult watching. I mean, the lack of commitment to some of her shots and the belief, it was really tough. And you have to think that a reminder was needed for Osaka that this is what she wants to be doing. She's going to be seeded at the US Open. This is a huge opportunity, and it's such a joy to be playing against someone like that in the final and be back in these finals. And I think that moment was completely lost on Osaka by the end of it.
Yeah, by the end of it, it didn't look like Osaka wanted to be there, and yeah, we'll talk about that in a sec. But I mean, just back to Mboko. I mean, her run really was incredible. She defeated four Grand Slam champions en route. She's now going to be, I think, projected to be number 24 in the rankings. She began outside the top 300 at the start of the season. Incredible.
Wow.
And as you said, like I think one thing I've noticed, particularly in these latter rounds, is not just kind of handling the moment, handling the crowd, playing in front of your home crowd. The fact that she was 6-2 down to Osaka, 6-1 down in the semi-final as well against Rybakina. The way that she has able to kind of get out of these really tight spots, these sticky situations, is another thing just to admire from a player who is in their debut season on the tour, 18 years old. It really is kind of fascinating, and where does Mboko go from here? because it's such a breakout moment. I think it caught her by surprise, perhaps a little bit. The fact that she's a wild card as well. Where does Mboko go from here?
Well, I saw her video after the final, and she's almost looks a bit too like stunned to take it all in. The fact this has happened, and suddenly she's doing, the WTA video saying thanks for the support, and she's just won a thousand title in her home country.
Are you surprised? Are you surprised it's happened like this quickly? Because I know she's been on people's radar, but we see with different, every player is different, and sometimes it takes a little bit longer. Are you surprised that Mboko has had this moment kind of so early on at 18 years old?
I am surprised. I really didn't think she was going to win that semi-final match. I thought she was going to have a really good run, but I thought there was almost no chance of her winning the title. I was really, really surprised by the end of the week. But when you watch her play, the more you watch her play, the less surprised you are, because it is. I mean, she's so good. She's such a natural timer of the ball, a great mover, and such a big hitter. It's almost like you've combined like Iga Swiatek's movement with Sabalenka's hitting power at times, and she was at times overpowering Osaka, as well as retrieving so many of the shots. So she's got such a complete game. So I think it's rare to see an 18-year-old where it comes together with such a complete game so early. Potentially the serve might be the area that does come a bit later, especially on the women's side of the tour. But I mean, remarkable rise from playing qualifying and being outside the top 300. If I were her, I definitely would take the week off next week. Do not go to Cincinnati, even if, she can't have a wild card, and she probably wouldn't have made it into the draw there. So I guess she's heading straight to the US Open. So take the expectations off. I think celebrate the week for what it is, and then regroup and see what you can do from there, because this probably wasn't part of her plan either. I don't think she was expecting to be at number 24 after her home Masters tournament. But I mean, unbelievable scenes, and also, I mean, definitely rest up given the fact that she did have that MRI earlier in the week on her wrist. So you don't want to mess with wrist injuries.
Yeah, and to do this in front of your home crowd, your first, let alone 1,000 title, first WTA Tour title, incredible. I mean, she becomes only the third Canadian to win their home event in the Open era, joining Bianca Andreescu in 2019 and Faye Urban in 1969. So it does not happen very often. I mean, just talking about Naomi Osaka, you sort of mentioned it there. I mean, she really did have the match by the scruff of her neck. It felt like, she was maybe going towards a straight sets victory. But what was it that, happened that gave Mboko the initiative?
The belief. We always talk about that. I think the belief is so important. I do think that the nature of the situation was quite different from, the support that Naomi is used to feeling. I don't think she's played that many Canadian players where the crowd would be so against her. I was quite surprised by how personally she took it. It was quite a strange...
Because you don't really kind of associate a Canadian crowd with, being really kind of pro one player, anti another. It sort of made me worry a little bit for, her in terms of like, the US Open coming up, because that could be, a lot more, could be a lot more extreme, and perhaps does show how, fragile maybe her kind of her mental game is at the moment.
And we did talk about that last time in terms of the mentality that needs to sort of shift a bit in terms of how she thinks about things. Getting a new coach and having great results this week is one thing, but I do think this sort of highlighted the fact that there are still those sort of problems that she has mentally in terms of how she thinks about the game, also how she processes things like this, because this is a hugely positive week for her. And not being a professional tennis player, I can't necessarily relate to the disappointment that she feels in that moment, but she was well aware of the fact that she was playing against a player who had described her as her idol. She said that was like a lot of like a big compliment, and that she never had anyone sort of say that to her before, and said that she didn't want to sort of mess that up when she played her. And then she literally did that when she did not behave in the best possible light and didn't even say congratulations to her opponent. And it just made me think, Joel, I don't know if you thought about this, but it sort of went straight back to that Serena Williams-Osaka final, where the moment, although it wasn't ruined in this sense, something was taken away because she didn't do what was expected of her in that moment, and sort of the bare minimum when it comes to congratulating someone, especially who holds you to such high esteem. Obviously, Serena did congratulate Naomi on that day, but the nature of the incident did leave Naomi in tears at the US Open in that clash. Not anywhere near as bad this time, obviously. But I mean, it was a
We we
wasn't a good
developing
look.
a we're developing a theme here because we had Sabalenka and Goff like earlier in the season. There just needs to be a playbook, doesn't there, on
Just
how to
bring out
do
your notes, right?
losing
Should we
participants
make a
in a
TikTok
final.
tutorial, Joel? How
I mean,
to celebrate a loss?
yes. I mean, I'm sure some of our listeners, I think Osaka has said that, and I don't know how much to believe into this and all that, but she said she forgot. But the facts are out there that she did not congratulate Mboko after the match, and as you said, this is her first WTA Tour title victory in front of her home crowd. This is a special moment. Did you feel like the fact that, regardless of if it was accidental or deliberate, did you feel like the fact that Osaka didn't reference her opponent take away from the moment?
Yeah, it's hard to answer. I do think that mentally she disappeared in that final set. I think she'd left the court in many
She's not
ways.
been in this situation for
Yeah, I
quite
guess
a
she hasn't
while.
done sort of the speeches in that way. I mean, maybe the WTA 125 that she won,
I
there was a
was thinking about
speech, but
that.
she
Yeah.
did win that. So I guess that was more of a positive affair.
Yeah.
I don't think it takes away from the victory. I think it does just highlight that although we're celebrating a return of form to Osaka, that it doesn't kind of mitigate the fact that you do have to do the work off the court as well as on the court. And it seems like the on court is getting there. But ultimately, it's just so easy just to say, well done,
Mm.
congratulations. But it seemed like she was quite bitter about or maybe bitter is too strong a word, but it seems like she did not enjoy the experience with the crowd.
Yeah, I mean, it just shows, I think, again with Osaka, I think it can just take one thing and for Osaka, like it can spiral from
Mm.
there. And this wasn't just sort of like a capitulation. I think in the third set, it felt like this was happening kind of midway through the second set and continued on from there. And it's certainly I think something that she's going to have to work on because there are definitely going to be more crowds in the future that are going to be more vociferous and not going to be in her favor. I mean, I'd say the Canadian crowd always to me is quite partisan, more like a British crowd really than an
Well,
American maybe or a
famously
French
nice
crowd.
Canadian. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't think it was too bad. I also think that the excitement that you feel towards a player who was down, obviously the crowd is going to try and
Mm.
lift them, especially in such a big final. And when they are on the younger end of the spectrum, it's just natural. So, I think she probably took it too personally, but again, it's easier for us to say than to process it in reality when it was a big tournament for her. Very, very exciting for her to be in that situation and watching it kind of go crashing down, especially to someone who is younger than you. You're chasing that result. You can want it too much, and maybe it's a case that that all came together. But take nothing away from Victoria Mboko because she played some fantastic tennis, and you don't beat champions like Osaka. And this week, well, not many people have come close to beating her, except for that match point that she sort of managed to save. It's been pretty straight set sailing for her, so very, very impressive. And I think it will be a lesson for Osaka that potentially for the future, maybe she can turn this into a positive because it has been a fantastic week for her and it has been a result that she needed, irrespective of what happened in the final.
And before we move on to the men quickly, Chris, and Boko's ceiling, where is that for you? Are we looking at a potentially a future world number one or a future Grand Slam champion? Where do you think the ceiling is from Boko?
I mean, you can't watch what we've seen this week and not think she could hit number one. It's such a fluid shot. It's so good off both wings. It's almost like she has more time on the ball than everyone else. Her
Mm.
racket head acceleration is something that I haven't really seen on the tour in quite some time. So I'm going to say the ceiling is there's no ceiling.
Ooh.
I think she will hit number one eventually. Again, there's always a lot of pressure on players that have a big sort of announcement to the tour like this, but she's too good not to go very, very high.
Yeah, I always think about, I think it was Denis Shapovalov. He had a really good run, I think, in Toronto quite a few years ago when he got to the semis, defeated a lot of big players, and we all thought, oh my God, this is great. Who's is he going to be able to, make dents into the tour and that could obviously happen in the future, but at the moment, he's seemingly kind of in the wilderness. So yeah,
Mm.
we will have to wait and see. Right, let's move on to talking about the ATP events in the Canada Open in Toronto. And Chris, Ben Shelton. Ben Shelton is the champion, first 1,000 title. Um, he defeated, sorry, Karen Khachanov in quite a nail-biting finale, 6-7, 6-4, 7-6. Really good performance from Ben Shelton. It felt like this was a moment, capturing the biggest title of his career, where he sort of has made good on all of his talent so far. The fact that he got to the Wimbledon semi-final as well. It's sort of an interesting one in the sense that he announced himself on the stage of, I feel like, on Grand Slams, because he's been in 2 semi-finals already, but he doesn't necessarily have maybe the titles to kind of back it up, because it's only his 3rd title. And yeah, he's not really. He sort of announced. He sort of needed this almost like as a stepping stone, but it's sort of gone the other way.
I mean, for sure, if you looked at, the top 10 prior to this result, he'd had finals in the last year in Basel and Munich, but he hadn't won a title in a little while. So it does feel like he does peak at the slams. He's a big match player potentially. So as you say, it's an important stepping stone. I also think it's probably pretty good for him because he is one of those players where, you can get very excited by him. He is on the younger end of the spectrum when it comes to the American cohort that are doing so well. And I think it does just sort of fuel that belief inside him that he can do more, that maybe he is sort of the next one to fill the void that Andy Roddick left. But American male tennis has not quite hit the heights. So
it's a big void. It's a big, big void.
And it's been a while, right?
It has been a while. I mean, he's the youngest American ATP Masters champion since Andy Roddick won in 2004 the Miami Open title.
Over 20 years.
Yeah, Andy Roddick was 21 then. So,
wow.
A long time. Does this then, for you, does this title kind of suggest that there are sort of brighter horizons ahead for American tennis? I mean, we'll get on to in a sec the rivalry or the head-to-head that he has with Taylor Fritz. But do you feel like we're coming closer to sort of closing that chapter or closing that void?
Oh, it's tricky because we did talk about the fact there are so many notable absences from this tournament.
Yes.
And I think this title probably says he's the best of the rest.
Yeah.
It's not quite the same as beating, an Alcaraz and a Sinner back to back. I mean, what Mboko did of beating 4 Grand Slam champions in a row, knocking out Coco Gauff. I mean, there were some pretty statement victories there, whereas, beating Taylor Fritz on your way to the title or Alex de Minaur is obviously a big win, but it's not the sort of win or the sort of player that you win, slams against, and that will be the biggest match of that slam tournament for you. So I don't think you can take something away from the fact that he has kind of got this 1,000 title, because it's a big title and there were some great players playing. Builder. Definitely. But I do think that there is probably an asterisk here before we get too excited and think he's going to, go up and challenge Alcaraz and Sinner, because, I mean, they're pretty untouchable right now.
Yeah. I think one thing to me that I was impressed by with Shelton was like the consistency. I think that's one of the things that kind of holds him back, is that he does have this ability to play incredible tennis, but there's also times where he really struggles to put it together on the tennis court. So the fact that he was able to be consistent more or less across the week, across the 12 days.
I keep saying the week as well. I'm like, across the 13 days and one Thursday.
Yeah. But to kind of show that, and, getting to a semi-final at Wimbledon as well, perhaps shows that he is building more consistency and he knows how to bring his best tennis, particularly against kind of those higher ranked players.
And he wasn't winning that many titles as well, as you say. So he was losing to these players more often than he was beating some of them. So maybe that is a sign of like the tide changing for him. I think he will cement himself potentially as a top 5 player, and maybe him and Jack Draper sit at a similar sort of level,
Okay.
of making top 8, maybe making a final potentially of a slam.
Where does he sit in relation to Taylor Fritz? Because they played each other in the semi-finals. I was looking at their head-to-head. It's one apiece, but they hadn't played each other in a couple of years, I think, until their semi-final. But how do you see that rivalry kind of blossoming? And how do you compare the two? Do you feel like the ceiling is higher with Shelton versus Fritz, or yeah, or do you feel like Fritz is a bit more of a model of consistency? How do you compare the two?
I'm not sure whether this is completely fair, but I've always thought that Ben Shelton would do more in tennis than Taylor Fritz. He did make deep, but he went a lot deeper at slams early in his career than Fritz did. And I also think off the ground, I do think he is probably the better player and physically the better player in long matches as well, potentially. Whereas the serve is such an important weapon for Fritz, but maybe the return is something where he's not quite as good. I think Shelton has more of the tools to challenge those top players in a way that maybe Fritz doesn't always, like, when he's played against Sinner. I mean, there's no shame in losing to Sinner in straight sets, but it wasn't particularly competitive at the US Open. Whereas you do feel like, Shelton's had moments where he really has challenged them, really has tested them. But having said that, he got absolutely, slaughtered out there against Sinner at Wimbledon. So
It's very true.
I guess they're in a similar boat there where you can't really compare them to the top players, but when you compare them to each other, I would say that Shelton does have the more promise. But I do think, put Fritz on a grass court at Wimbledon and give him a good draw, and he could pick up a Wimbledon title. I wouldn't bet against that either. So I don't know. Where do you stand, Joel?
Yeah,
You love Fritz though, don't you?
I do love Fritz. I do think Fritz is more consistent, perhaps not as flashy as Shelton, but I do I do like Fritz. I still feel like Shelton's still a bit rough around the edges. I still think there's quite a few elements of his game that he can work on, and I still feel that actually that Fritz is maybe closer in some regards to Sinner and Alcaraz versus Ben Shelton, because his game, I know there have been always kind of questions on his movement, etc., but I still feel like his game is more well-rounded and he can
More
hang
complete.
tough more. Yeah, maybe perhaps a little bit easier. I mean, Chris, very quickly, one player I wanted to add into the mix, Karen Khachanov, because he is a player we don't really, speak about. We just sort of expect him maybe to make a quarterfinal or a semi-final, and good for him. He can kind of keep his ranking there. But he, reached the final here in Toronto, and this is the first final he has reached at a Masters 1000 level since he won the Paris Masters back in 2018. So it has not happened in a long, long time. In fact, it's the longest gap of any player between two Masters 1000 finals. So I guess in some regards, that shows, he's been a threat for a while. But yeah, where do you stand on Khachanov and being a threat like Fritz and Shelton? Is he in the same group?
I probably would say he isn't in that same sort of cohort. It's
Why not?
probably, I think he has those moments where he has great results. At at Masters, he's obviously won a title. He reached the Olympic Games final, and also I think didn't he also make a quarterfinals or better at every single slam. So he's had some really good results. Wimbledon quarterfinal, but he doesn't necessarily play brave tennis. And his whole game used to be based on being such a big hitter. And I think that's probably where, for me, there is that the lack of risk sometimes that he takes. And the mental side of things means that in tight matches, I wouldn't bet on him, a bit like with Zverev. So he's had a career high of number 8. I think he probably has maximized where he can get to potentially. I do think he could get back to the top 10. He'll be at number 12 now. But at the same time, I'm not necessarily predicting that, at 29, this is going to be the resurgence that will take him, all the way to the top. Having said that, you made the most of the opportunity, the fact there weren't some of those top stars. But are you predicting something big on the horizon?
It's just hard to get excited because, you look at his form here and some of the results. They're all quite, like, he has come through, but they're all quite close. It doesn't scream to me that he has maybe kind of like a ruthlessness, or you should be getting these matches done kind of like a little bit easier, against Alex Mickelson 6-4 7-6.
There's a lot of tie breaks.
It's a lot of tight matches, a lot of tightness. Even with the the Zverev matches as in the semi-finals, it went down to a final set
And a
tie
match
break.
point that he had to save. So
So it feels like he still relies on that sort of those 50-50 moments a bit too much, and maybe it sort of ran out in the final. So yeah, I think for me that's maybe what's kind of keeping him back. But he's certainly, I think, making the most. He's making the most of his talents, which there's a lot of players on the tour who probably would love to be in Khachanov's position in terms of maximizing what they have.
completely. And I think that's where, when there are players who aren't in the draw, you really have got to take the chance. And maybe some of the players in the draw were thinking a bit too much about the fact that this might be the best chance to get a Masters without some of the top players playing. But they are playing this week. They've already
They are
this week,
this week,
next
last
week.
week, next week.
They're in
Yes,
Cincinnati.
that's all we know. They're in Cincinnati. The tennis has started because I had an eye on Danilovic versus Katie Boulter last night because Katie Boulter got bageled
Oh
in the
goodness.
first set 6-love. I don't actually know what the result of that match was, but
She lost the next set 7-5,
oh,
unfortunately.
okay,
So
all
she
right,
is
there you
out.
go.
So she
All
won't
right.
be playing against Emma
Okay,
Raducanu with
there we
round
go.
two.
I mean, Chris, just before we get into the draws and look at them very, very quickly, we are technically at the midway point of this sort of revamped lead up to the US Open. It's quite interesting hearing what the players have to say about it. What do you think about it from a fan perspective?
Ooh, I think it's
Keep
interesting.
it PG.
Oh, it's tough. I'm gonna keep it PG. I like the fact that they've invested in the Cincinnati tournament, so that they've much improved the facilities. They've done a whole revamp. They've got new courts. I really do like the fact that if you are going to make it a longer tournament, and we are going to have these sort of overlaps, and that they are actually great events, so the people going to them will really enjoy them. That's probably like the biggest positive that I would have. I really do not like waking up on a Friday and we have two champions to crown on a Thursday. I can't really
Yeah.
get over that. It's very
They
confusing.
were at this. They were at the same time as well because there was a strange. I mean, it was an incredible moment. Actually, it just showed. I think the magnitude of the result. They stopped during the men's final to a the whole crowd was applauding because Mboko had just won. It just shows.
In a different city.
Yeah, but like the fact that they were played at the same time, I'm sort of like, hang on, shouldn't these be? Ideally, these would be played at, I guess, at different times.
The advantage is that you don't have to play them at the same time because they're not at the same tournament. So I really do think that it's not good for tennis.
Should they go back to Would you like to see them be single week events?
I would, because I think you'd also get top players going, because I guess the negative side is for the crowd is the fact that you don't get the top players playing. Also, we've got this warm-up week for the US Open. Djokovic has pulled out of Cincinnati. I imagine that's because the mixed doubles he's playing, and he'll get a lot of time on court with the top players the week before. So it does feel like you can't play every week and play your best every week. And I think players are now thinking, where there are two back-to-back Masters, which one am I going to play? And we'll see next year if more people do sort of split their time and have one they prioritize.
Yeah, and for the top players, I mean, I was just kind of thinking about this. The fact that these tournaments have now been extended from a week to 12 days, like in my head also, that it's almost having a negative impact in the sense that if it's coming off the back of a big tournament like a Grand Slam, to the players, is it not kind of like, oh, I've got more rest. I've actually got more rest time here because I've not just got a week. I've got 12 days I could look forward to. So I just wonder from that perspective as well. It's just not very good. But Thursday finals, scheduling overlaps. It's just it's
And now we're
too
thinking,
confusing.
what round are we on in Cincinnati? And
Yeah.
we've only just finished the last one. So it's strange to do a draw
and there's
preview
not
when the
really-
tournament started.
And there's not really much to talk about, if we're being quite honest, with all the round one matches happen because all the big players come in round two. They all get a bye. And so these matches just sort of happen in the shadow of the finals. I mean, yes, we did have Venus Williams against Bouzous Monero yesterday, but apart from that, not really much to talk about in terms of results so far. Having said that, on the men's tour, we do have Sinner back. We have Alcaraz back as well. Chris, have you had a chance to look at the draws? Because there are some kind of interesting, kind of matchups there. I mean, we've got, of course, we've got Shelton in there, Zverev as well. But Sinner and Alcaraz returning, no Djokovic. Are we just every tournament we're just going to be like, are we going to get a Sinner Alcaraz final?
You would be mad not to predict it, probably, I would say, especially when you haven't got Djokovic, well, or Draper playing, who's still out injured. So I'm still looking at that part of the draw. There will be some interesting clashes potentially, but maybe not so much the big names having interesting clashes. I mean, I'm quite interested to see some of the matches. I think Tommy Paul has got a really interesting draw there. He could be playing Mashak in, that would be the round of 32, and then the winner of that would play Sinner. So that could be quite entertaining. But as you do say, it does take a while for these tournaments to get going. It's almost like the draw is only made when the first round matches have happened, because then you find out who the top seeds will be playing. So that is a strange one about it. But we've got an interesting round 2 in Casper Ruud versus Rinderknech. So there's a few things.
I was looking at Fekina as well. Fekina Fonseca. I think that could be quite tasty.
That would be really good. I'll definitely be watching that one. And maybe it would be interesting to see how last week's finalists do. I always like to see if someone can back it up. It's going to be tricky. Maybe if I was Ben Shelton, I probably would skip this. So let's see if he does play.
If they do play, yeah. I mean, just looking at the women's draw as well, Sabalenka has returned. I mean, she's at a really interesting part of the draw. She's got Vondrousova, battle of a former Wimbledon champion in Vondrousova, and could potentially face Raducanu in a Wimbledon repeat. In round 3. So
and Raducanu's seeded. It's been a long time since we've seen her seeded at 1,000 events. So that is definitely good to see. I think Sabalenka's been on holiday again. She said she did half an hour of exercise, and that was on the Stairmaster, and that was to make room for dinner. So yeah, she's getting herself back into form, I think, is key there. Again, it will be interesting to see because we have got everybody, and I think that does make it a lot more exciting. And maybe we will get, a really interesting clash. I'd like to see some of the top 4, top 3 names play each other, because although we do get that sometimes, we haven't had a big contest like that for a little while now.
And you think that, quite a few of these players went out early in Canada. They will want to kind of put things right, you feel like. I'm thinking like Coco Gauff, Jessica Pegula, now that they're in America, they will feel, I feel like maybe there's a little bit more pressure there going into the US Open. So
we can forgive Coco for that loss now. We should also make an apology to her that she did lose to someone who arguably was playing, top 5 tennis and did run away with the title. So we can look at that loss, and probably she'll reflect on that loss as actually not anywhere near as bad as, people made it out to be. And I actually think, Joel, if we get into predictions, I do think Coco Gauff's going to win this week. I'm going to say it. I think if you did that well against Mboko, and she's going to get some form going before the US Open, that's probably my prediction.
Okay. And men's prediction?
I mean, how can you bet against Sinner at the moment?
He's defending champion, isn't he?
I mean, he's going to win it, I think.
Okay.
That sounded a bit resigned, but I think more.
He's going to win it.
Yeah,
he's going to win it.
He will.
Right. I'm going to say.
Fekina?
I'm going to say Carlos Alcaraz. There we go.
Okay, just to be different.
Carlos Alcaraz, just to be different. Yep. And I'm going to go with, in the women's draw, I still think it's very open. I'm going to go with.
You don't know. Normally you've gone for a Rybakina recently.
I'm going to go Madison Keys.
She's done one in Cincinnati before. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm riding high off my Ben Shelton prediction. I predicted him champion of in Canada.
I completely forgot that, because during the tournament you really thought he stood no chance against Alex de Minaur.
And then I slated him against Alex de Minaur.
Maybe that's what we should do a bit more of, like, choose whichever one worked out well. That's what I like to do, like collect a set and our predictions.
Right, we're going to wrap up our latest tour catch-up here at Tennis Weekly HQ, our 4-day catch-up. We hope you've enjoyed the
We're not seeing you in another 4 days, are we? Are we?
Tennis,
No.
Tennis 4-day podcast. No, it doesn't have the same ring to it.
Bi-weekly, but
but
can see.
Yeah. Right. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss a moment of action on the ATP and WTA tours. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and all your favorite podcasting platforms out there. And if you love what you're hearing, be sure to leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, as well as hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube.
And you can stay connected with us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, and X. And the handle for all of those is Tennis Weekly Pod. And if you'd like to get in touch with us, we would love a mailbag. We haven't done one in a little while. So please do send us your questions. And please do tell us what you think about this new Masters format and the crossover that exists. And if you'd like to let us know, that would be on tennisweeklypod@gmail.com or visit our website, tennisweekly.co.uk.
And we'll be back next time for another talk catch up. But until then, it's goodbye from Chris.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from me. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time on Tennis Weekly.